He offered his jacket to a shivering woman at the bus stop, not knowing she was a millionaire who. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The wind cut through the night like a cold blade. Snow drifted down over the quiet streets of New York City, soft and endless, coating the sidewalks in white. Under the dim orange glow of a street lamp, a young man stood at the nearly empty bus stop. His name was Henry Miles. He was 26 years old, tall, with tired eyes and a face that had not seen a real smile in months. His jacket was old, its edges frayed, its color faded by too many winters. He hugged it tight around his body, clutching a folder filled with job applications that no one had answered. The bus was late again. The clock above the pharmacy across the street blinked 9:32. Henry stamped his boots against the ground, trying to feel something other than the sting of cold. His stomach growled quietly, reminding him that his last meal had been a sandwich from the shelter more than 12 hours ago. Still, he stayed. Hope, however thin, was something he could not afford to lose. Through the curtain of falling snow, a woman appeared. She was young, no more than 25, dressed in a business skirt and blouse, completely unsuited for the storm. Her hair was damp, sticking to her cheeks. She wrapped her bare arms around herself, trembling as she reached the bus stop and stood a few feet from him. Her lips were pale. She had no coat, no umbrella, just exhaustion in her eyes. Henry tried not to stare. He turned away, pretending to check the bus schedule. But when a gust of wind roared down the street, she flinched and let out a small gasp, her hands shaking. Something in Henry's chest tightened. He looked at her again. She was clearly freezing. He hesitated for a moment, then made a choice. Without saying a word, he took off his jacket. The cold bit into him immediately, but he ignored it. He stepped closer and held it out. "Take this," he said quietly. She blinked, startled. "I cannot. You need it more than I do." Henry gave a faint, tired smile. "I have already lost enough today. This is the only thing I have left to give." The woman hesitated, then let him drape the coat over her shoulders. The warmth surprised her. It smelled faintly of soap, coffee, and something human comfort. She pulled it tighter without meaning to. Her eyes met his for a brief second. "Thank you," she whispered. Henry nodded and stepped back, folding his arms against the biting air. They stood in silence while the snow fell harder, covering the world in quiet white. For a long moment, it felt like the whole city had disappeared, leaving only the two of them beneath the flickering light. "What is your name?" she asked finally, her voice soft, almost uncertain. "Henry," he answered. "And you?" "Clare." "Nice to meet you, Clare." "You should not have given me your jacket," she said again, shaking her head slightly. He smiled faintly. "Probably not, but I could not just watch you freeze." The low rumble of an approaching bus broke the silence. Headlights glowed through the snow as it pulled up beside them. Claire took a small step forward, then turned back to him. "Do you have somewhere to go?" she asked. Henry shrugged. "Somewhere," he said simply, not explaining that it was the back seat of an old truck parked behind a warehouse. Claire reached into her purse and handed him a small business card. "In case you ever need anything," she said. He accepted it, sliding it into the worn folder in his hands without looking at it. People said things like that all the time, he thought. Most did not mean it. Claire climbed aboard the bus. She looked back once more through the fogged window as the door closed. Henry stood there in the falling snow, shivering not only from the cold, but from something he could not name. The bus pulled away, leaving him alone in the quiet night. The snow swirled around him like a silent storm, erasing his footprints. Henry looked down the empty road, then up at the white sky, his breath rising like a faint prayer. "Maybe tomorrow," he whispered and began to walk. The bus disappeared into the snow, its red taillights fading into the white night. Henry stood for a long time, watching the place where it vanished. Then he turned and began the slow walk toward the industrial edge of the city. The air bit into his skin through the thin shirt. Every step crunched over the frozen ground. His breath came out in short white bursts. 2 blocks later, he reached the warehouse district. Behind an old brick building, an ancient blue truck waited like a rusted memory. The windshield was cracked, the doors dented, the tires half flat, but to Henry, it was home. He climbed inside, rubbing his hands together for warmth. A small battery lantern flickered on the dashboard. He set down his folder, opened a tin box from the glove compartment, and stared at the photograph inside. In the photo, a woman laughed beneath a paper lantern. Her name was Lily. Next to her, a little boy grinned with missing front teeth, holding a paper model of a bridge. Henry touched the image gently with his thumb. "Good night, Lily. Good night, Noah," he whispered. The truck creaked as the wind pushed against it. He pulled a blanket around himself and leaned back. Sleep did not come easily. Every sound outside, the siren in the distance, the hum of traffic, felt like the echo of another life. Once, not long ago, he had lived in a small apartment with a balcony and morning coffee with his wife. He had built schools, community centers, hospitals. He had worn a clean shirt, carried a briefcase, and believed that hard work was enough to keep life steady. Then the illness came. Lily's cancer had appeared out of nowhere. 9 months later, she was gone. Henry left his job to care for her and never recovered financially. The bills stacked high, the savings drained, the apartment gone. He sold the car, then the furniture, until the only thing left was the old truck. He did not care much about comfort anymore, only survival. He closed his eyes, but sleep stayed away. His mind replayed the moment at the bus stop, the way Clare had looked at him when he gave her the coat. Not with pity, but with surprise, as if no one had ever done something kind for her before. There had been a spark there, a tiny flicker of warmth that cut through the cold. The next morning, gray light crept through the truck's windows. Henry woke stiff and cold, his breath fogged in the air. He sat up, rubbing his arms, then reached for his small notebook. The cover was torn, the pages filled with dates, notes, and job listings. He checked one circled in red. Infinity Build, maintenance assistant, walk-in interviews, 9 a.m. He straightened his shirt as best he could, combed his hair with his fingers, and stepped outside. The street smelled of wet asphalt and diesel. The sun was rising behind the skyscrapers, turning the clouds gold. He took a deep breath and started walking. By 8:50, he stood in front of the glass tower of Infinity Build. The building stretched high into the gray sky, all steel and mirrored windows. Henry caught his reflection in the glass, a man who looked older than his years. He tightened his grip on the folder and walked through the revolving doors. Inside, everything gleamed. The lobby smelled of coffee and polished marble. A receptionist in a navy blazer looked up. "Can I help you?" "Yes, ma'am," Henry said. "I am here for the maintenance position." She handed him a form and gestured toward a bench. While he filled it out, he noticed the people passing by, men in tailored suits, women with tablets and lanyards. He could almost smell the success on them. For a second, shame burned in his chest, but he forced himself to breathe. He reminded himself of what Lily used to say. "You are not the things you own, Henry. You are what you give." He submitted the form and waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The receptionist finally called his name. "I am sorry," she said, not meeting his eyes. "The position has been filled." Henry nodded slowly. "Thank you for your time." Outside, the wind picked up again. He walked down the street, the rejection sinking in like cold water. The city buzzed around him, busy and bright, but he felt invisible. He sat on a bench near a small park, opened his folder, and looked at the business card the woman had given him the night before. White letters on a black background read, "Clare Raymond, Infinity Build Group, Chief Executive Officer." He stared at the card, unsure if his frozen fingers were shaking from cold or disbelief. The woman from the bus stop, the one wearing his coat, the one who had said, "In case you ever need anything." A strange laugh escaped him, half amusement, half exhaustion. "A millionaire," he murmured. "Of course." He slipped the card back into the folder, closed it, and leaned against the bench. Snowflakes drifted through the air again, soft and slow. Somewhere above the noise of the city, a church bell rang the hour. Henry looked up at the gray sky and whispered the same words as the night before. "Maybe tomorrow." The snow had eased by the next afternoon. leaving the streets slick with melting ice. Henry spent most of the morning walking from one construction site to another, asking for work, handing out his resume, and hearing the same quiet refusals. By the time the sky turned pale gray again, his shoes were soaked and his hands were numb. He stopped at a corner diner, counting the few bills left in his wallet. It was just enough for a cup of coffee and a sandwich. He sat near the window, watching the traffic crawl by. The heater hummed softly beside him, but his mind was elsewhere. The business card lay on the table, beside his coffee cup. He kept glancing at it as though it might vanish. Clare Raymond, he murmured again. The name still sounded unreal, like something out of another world. He turned the card over, tracing the embossed logo of Infinity Build with his thumb. He remembered the way she had looked that night, her hair wet, her voice quiet but steady. The thought of her being the head of this massive company felt impossible. But the card was real. Her name was real. Henry slid the card back into his folder. The waitress refilled his cup and gave him a kind smile. "You look like you could use a good day," she said. "I could use one of those," he replied with a tired grin. After he left the diner, he walked several blocks toward the small public library, where he sometimes spent the afternoons. The place was warm, and no one asked questions. He sat at a computer terminal and typed Infinity Build Group into the search bar. Dozens of headlines appeared instantly. Clare Raymond, youngest female CEO in the firm's history, philanthropist. Daughter of Richard Raymond, founder of Infinity Build. Henry leaned back in his chair, letting the words sink in. So, she was not only successful, she was born into success. He shut the browser and rubbed his face with both hands. For a moment, he wondered if giving her that jacket had meant anything at all. Probably not, he thought. To someone like her, he was just a stranger from a cold night. But deep down, another voice whispered, "Then why did she give you her card?" He stayed at the library until dusk. When it closed, he returned to his truck and turned on the small lantern. He opened his sketchbook and began to draw, something he had not done in months. The pencil moved slowly at first, tracing the outline of a bridge over a frozen river. It was the same bridge he used to draw with his son, Noah. Drawing had always calmed him, reminded him that he was still capable of creating something beautiful, even in the ruins. By midnight, the sketch was finished. A small note sat at the bottom corner. Brooklyn Bridge, December 15th. Hope. He tore the page out carefully, folded it, and placed it inside the pocket of his worn jacket, the one Clare had worn the night before. The next morning brought an unexpected knock on the truck window. Henry startled awake. A uniformed officer stood outside, his breath misting in the cold air. "Sir, you cannot park here overnight," the man said, not unkindly. Henry nodded quickly. "Understood, officer. I will move right away." He started the engine, which coughed twice before coming to life. As he drove toward the river, he glanced again at the folded paper in his pocket. Something about it pulled at him, a quiet reminder that he still had a purpose somewhere. He parked near the Brooklyn Bridge and stepped out, watching the water shimmer beneath the rising Sunday. The city skyline glowed gold on the horizon. The cold wind whipped through his shirt, but for the first time in weeks, he did not care. Henry pulled out the folded sketch and looked at it one last time. Then, without thinking too much, he wrote a small message on the back with his pencil. "For the woman in the snow. If you ever find this, thank you." He tucked the drawing into the pocket of his coat, intending to return it to her someday if fate ever allowed it. At that very moment, across town, Clare Raymond sat in her corner office, staring at the same jacket draped over the back of her chair. She had meant to return it sooner, but something about it made her pause each time she reached for it. It was not just a coat. It was a piece of the night that had changed something inside her. Her assistant knocked and entered. "Miss Raymond, the board meeting starts in 15 minutes. Clare nodded, still holding the jacket in her hands. "Thank you, Emily. I will be there." When the door closed, Clare turned the jacket over and noticed a piece of paper tucked inside the inner pocket. She unfolded it carefully. It was a pencil drawing delicate lines forming the Brooklyn Bridge under a swirl of snow. At the bottom was a single word: hope. For a moment, Clare forgot to breathe. Her eyes softened, and something warm flickered behind them. She set the paper on her desk, staring at it for a long while before whispering to herself, "Who are you, Henry Miles?" The city outside her window stretched endlessly, filled with millions of strangers. But somehow, she knew she would see him again. 2 days passed before Henry saw her again. The winter sun was thin and colorless, hanging low over the skyline. He was working at a construction site near the East River, carrying lumber and sweeping dust from the half-finished floors. The pay was small, the hours long, but it was honest work. Each strike of his hammer, each lifted beam, reminded him that he still had strength left in him. At noon, he sat on a wooden crate and opened a small paper bag from the food truck. 1 sandwich, 1 apple, 1 cup of coffee that had already gone lukewarm. He ate quietly, staring at the bridge in the distance, the same bridge he had drawn. The wind carried the sound of traffic and the faint music of a street performer somewhere down the block. Then, a voice behind him broke through the noise. "Henry Miles?" He turned quickly. The woman standing there looked out of place in her tailored gray coat and black gloves. Her hair was pinned neatly, her shoes spotless even on the muddy ground. But her face, he recognized it instantly. "Claire," he said, rising to his feet. "You. What are you doing here?" "I came to return something," she said softly. In her hands was his folded drawing. "You left this inside your coat." Henry blinked in surprise. "You kept it?" "I could not throw it away," she admitted. "It reminded me of that night. And of you." He took the paper, unfolding it carefully. "I drew this before I lost everything," he said quietly. "I did not think anyone would ever see it again." Claire smiled faintly. "Then maybe fate had other plans." She hesitated, studying him for a moment. "Do you have time for coffee?" "There is a place down the street." Henry hesitated. He was dusty, tired, and still wearing the same work jacket. "You do not have to do that," he said. "I want to," Claire replied. "Please." Minutes later, they sat across from each other in a small corner cafe, steam rising from their cups. The city moved outside the window, unaware of them. "You work hard," Claire said, glancing at the dirt on his sleeves. "How long have you been in construction?" "Most of my life," he answered. "My father taught me. But I used to design buildings too, before things changed." Claire leaned forward slightly. "What happened?" He took a slow breath. "My wife passed away. I left my firm to take care of her. After she was gone, the debts caught up. I lost my home, then my job. It all just—" He stopped, shaking his head. "You know how it goes." Claire's eyes softened. "I am sorry, Henry. Truly." He gave a small, lopsided smile. "It is all right. I survived. That is enough." For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was not awkward, it was almost peaceful. The snow outside had started again, falling gently against the window. Claire stirred her coffee, then said quietly, "You wrote one word on that drawing. Hope. Do you still believe in it?" Henry looked at her, the faintest spark in his eyes. "Some days I do. Some days I have to remind myself why." "Then maybe I can help with that," she said. He frowned slightly. "How?" Claire reached into her purse and took out a simple white envelope. "I am hosting a community project through my company Infinity Build. We are helping rebuild old community centers across the city. I would like you to be part of it." Henry blinked, confusion washing over him. "Infinity Build?" "Yes," she said. "It is my family's company." He stared at her for a long moment, realization dawning. "You mean you are the CEO?" Claire nodded. "I did not tell you before because I wanted you to see me as just Claire." Henry let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. "So the woman at the bus stop was actually a millionaire." She smiled. "And the man who gave her his jacket was actually an architect." He shook his head slowly, still trying to process it. "I do not know what to say." "Say yes," she said simply. "Join the project. I believe your kindness should build more than bridges on paper." Henry looked down at the envelope, then back at her. For the first time in a long while, he felt something rising in his chest, something close to possibility. "All right," he said finally. "I will come by tomorrow." Claire's smile widened, soft and genuine. "Good. Tomorrow then." As they left the cafe, the snow fell heavier, swirling in the streetlights. Henry walked beside her, the cold forgotten, a strange warmth growing between them that neither could quite explain. The next morning, The city woke under a soft layer of snow. The air was sharp, but the sky was clear, filled with pale sunlight that bounced off the rooftops. Henry arrived at the Infinity Build headquarters right on time. His boots were clean, his shirt pressed, his old jacket brushed free of dust. He stood at the foot of the massive glass tower and took a steady breath before stepping inside. The lobby was bright, full of energy and quiet conversation. People moved with purpose, their shoes clicking across marble floors. Henry approached the front desk, feeling slightly out of place among the sleek suits and polished smiles. "Good morning," he said to the receptionist. "My name is Henry Miles. I have an appointment with Miss Clare Raymond." The woman smiled politely and checked her computer. "Yes, Mr. Miles, she is expecting you. Take the elevator to the top floor." The ride up felt endless. The numbers glowed one by one until the doors finally opened to a hallway lined with framed blueprints and architectural photographs. At the end stood a pair of glass doors with her name in silver letters. Clare Raymond, Chief Executive Officer. He hesitated only a moment before knocking. "Come in," her voice called. Clare stood by the window, sunlight catching the edge of her hair. The city stretched out behind her like a living map. She turned when he entered, her smile calm but warm. "You came," she said. "I said I would," Henry replied. She motioned for him to sit, then handed him a folder. Inside were sketches and blueprints for a project titled Build for Good. The goal was simple: restore abandoned buildings and turn them into learning centers and shelters. "I need someone who understands both design and compassion," Clare said. "Someone who remembers what it feels like to build with purpose, not just profit." Henry studied the plans. "This is ambitious," he said quietly, "and beautiful. I think you can help me make it real," she said. He looked up, uncertain. "Why me?" "Because you gave something without expecting anything in return," Clare answered. "That is rare, and that is exactly what this city needs." For a long moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of traffic far below. Henry finally nodded. "All right," he said. "Where do we start?" Claire's smile widened. "We start here." She handed him a company badge, with his name printed in clean black letters. "Welcome to Infinity Build, Mr. Miles." "Oh." The words hit him harder than he expected. For the first time in years, he felt like someone believed in him again. They spent the rest of the morning reviewing designs and planning visits to several construction sites. Claire's leadership was sharp but kind. She listened more than she spoke. Henry admired how she treated every worker with respect, greeting the janitor and the project manager with the same warmth. By evening, when they stepped out of the building, the city lights shimmered against the snow. Clare turned to him and said, "I hope today did not feel too overwhelming." Henry shook his head. "It felt right." She nodded. "Good. There is one more thing. Tomorrow, we are hosting a small charity event for our community partners. I would like you to attend as my guest." Henry hesitated. "I do not exactly own a suit anymore." Clare smiled. "Then we will fix that. Consider it part of your new role." He laughed softly, a sound that felt foreign on his tongue. "All right, Miss Raymond, I will be there." "Call me Clare," she said. When he walked away that night, the wind was cold, but his heart was not. For the first time in a long time, Henry Miles did not feel invisible. He felt seen, and somewhere deep down, a quiet hope began to stir again. The following evening, the city glowed under strings of white lights. The Infinity Build Charity Gala was being held in the ballroom of the Hilton on Fifth Avenue, a grand space filled with music, champagne, and people who wore their wealth like armor. Henry stood near the entrance, adjusting the borrowed suit that Claire's assistant had arranged for him. It fit surprisingly well, though he still felt like a stranger wearing someone else's life. He caught sight of Clare across the room before she saw him. She wore a midnight blue gown that shimmered softly under the chandeliers. The sight of her stole his breath. For a moment, he forgot the crowd, the music, the anxious knot in his chest. Then she turned and smiled, and everything else disappeared. "You clean up well, Mr. Miles," she said as she reached him. "You too, Miss Raymond," he replied, and she laughed. "I mean Clare." "Better," she teased. "Come, there are some people I want you to meet." "Oh." She introduced him to several board members and donors, explaining his role in the Build for Good project. Henry shook hands, nodded politely, and tried not to think about how out of place he felt among the tailored suits and polished conversation. But every time he glanced at Clare, she gave him that same encouraging smile, the one that told him he belonged there, even if he did not believe it yet. After the introductions, they stepped onto a balcony overlooking the city. The cold air felt cleaner out there, the noise of the party muffled behind them. Clare leaned against the railing, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "I did not thank you properly for joining this project," she said quietly. "You have already given it more heart than most people ever would." Henry shook his head. "You are the one giving me a chance, Clare. That is something I have not had in a long time." She turned toward him, her voice soft. "You deserved one. Everyone does." "Oh." For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of cars far below. Then Clare said, "You know, when I took over this company, I promised myself I would not let it lose its soul. But I almost forgot what that meant until I met you." Henry looked at her, surprised by the emotion in her voice. "You make it sound like I did something extraordinary." "You did," she said. "You reminded me that kindness still exists." He smiled faintly. "It goes both ways." "Oh." A moment passed quiet, electric, full of something neither of them dared to name. Then someone called Clare's name from inside. She sighed and straightened. "Duty calls," she said. He nodded. "Go. I will be fine." As she turned to leave, she paused and looked back at him. "Stay close. I might need you for the next announcement." When she disappeared into the crowd, Henry stayed on the balcony, staring out at the skyline. He thought about how strange life could be a month ago. He was sleeping in his truck, invisible to the world. Now he was standing in a ballroom surrounded by the city's most powerful people, wearing a suit that was not his, working for a woman who had turned a single act of kindness into something life-changing. But deep down, a quiet unease stirred. The world he had entered felt fragile, like glass beautiful, but easily shattered. He wondered how long this fragile peace could last, and what would happen when the truth about his past finally caught up with him. Inside the ballroom, applause echoed as Clare took the stage. Her eyes found his through the crowd, steady and bright. And for the first time that night, Henry let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he belonged there after all. The applause inside the ballroom faded as Clare finished her speech, but the warmth of the evening did not last long. The next morning, headlines spread across every business website and social feed. Infinity Build CEO hires homeless man as advisor. Charity or publicity? Clare Raymond's strange new project sparks controversy. Henry read the words on a newspaper that someone had left in the break room of the construction site. His chest tightened with every line. There was a photo of him at the gala, standing beside Clare on the balcony. The caption beneath it read, "From the streets to the spotlight." "Oh." He set the paper down slowly, his hands trembling. Around him, a few workers whispered, trying not to stare. The whispers burned more than the cold ever could. When Clare arrived at the office that morning, she could sense the tension before she even stepped out of the elevator. Her assistant rushed to her with a worried look. "It is everywhere," the woman said. "The board is demanding a meeting." Clare closed her eyes briefly. "Schedule it for this afternoon." By noon, the conference room was filled with sharp suits and sharper voices. One of the board members, an older man named Mr. Harlan, spoke first. "Clare, this experiment of yours has gone too far. Hiring a man off the street might look noble, but it makes the company appear reckless." Clare met his stare without flinching. "Henry Miles is not a publicity stunt. He is qualified, compassionate, and working harder than anyone I know." "Oh, be that as it may," Harlan said, his tone dripping with skepticism. "This story has gone viral for all the wrong reasons. Our investors are nervous. If you do not act, your position will be questioned." Clare stood silently for a moment, then said evenly, "I will handle it." After the meeting, she found Henry sitting alone on a bench near the site office. His posture was tense, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I saw the news," she said softly. He looked up, pain flashing in his eyes. "So did everyone else. I told you this would happen. I do not belong in your world, Clare." "That is not true," she said firmly. He shook his head. "Look around. They see me as your project, not your partner. And maybe they are right. maybe I should never have come here. She stepped closer. Do not say that. You earned your place. Henry stood abruptly, his voice low but steady. No. You gave me a place, and now you are paying for it. I cannot let you do that. Henry, please. But he was already walking away, the echo of his footsteps fading down the corridor. That night, the rain returned, washing over the city in sheets. Claire sat in her office long after everyone had gone home. On her desk lay the old sketch of the Brooklyn Bridge, its pencil lines now smudged from where she had held it too tightly. Across town, Henry sat in his truck again, staring at the city lights through the rain-streaked windshield. The suit from the gala hung beside him, still perfectly pressed, as if waiting for a man who no longer existed. He whispered into the silence, "You were right, Claire. Kindness does not belong in a world like that." But as the rain drummed against the glass, a different truth tugged at him, quiet, stubborn, and unshakable. It was not kindness that had broken him. It was fear. And for the first time in years, he realized he was tired of running from the things that made him human. Still, when dawn came, the truck was gone from the parking lot outside Infinity Build. Only the folded sketch of the bridge remained on Claire's desk, like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. 3 weeks passed. The city moved on, but Claire did not. Every morning, she looked out her office window, expecting to see Henry walking through the glass doors again. He never did. The Build for Good project continued. But without him, something essential was missing. Meetings felt colder, designs more mechanical. The heart had gone out of it. One evening, as she reviewed progress reports, her assistant entered with a tablet. "You should see this," she said. On the screen was a short local news clip. The headline read, "Former Architect Helps Rebuild Community Center in Brooklyn." The video showed Henry standing in front of an old brick building, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by volunteers. He was teaching a group of men and women how to frame a new roof. The reporter's voice said, after losing his job and home, Henry Miles founded the One Kindness Project, a volunteer program helping unemployed workers learn construction skills. His message is simple. Everyone deserves a second chance. Claire's eyes filled before she could stop them. She pressed play again, watching his smile as he helped a child paint a sign over the doorway. The sign read, "Hope lives here." She closed her laptop and grabbed her coat. Moments later, she was in her car heading toward Brooklyn. The drive was long, and the streets were slick with evening rain. When she arrived, the site was quiet except for the soft clatter of tools. Henry was still there, sweeping the floor. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. Surprise flickered in his eyes, followed by hesitation. "Claire," he said quietly. "You should not be here." "I had to see it for myself," she replied. "The news said you built this." He gave a small shrug. "We built it. I just showed them how." "It is beautiful," she said. "You turned your pain into something that helps people." Henry looked down at his hands, calloused and rough. "It was the only way to feel useful again. Besides, I learned from someone who believed kindness could build something real." Claire stepped closer. "That someone still believes it." "You were right about one thing, though. My world was too cold. But you reminded me what warmth feels like." He shook his head. "You do not owe me anything, Claire." "I know," she said softly. "That is why I am here, because I want to be." They stood in silence, the rain pattering against the roof above them. The air between them was heavy with everything left unsaid. Claire glanced around the half-finished room. "This place," she said, "it deserves more support. Let me help you expand it. We can partner with Infinity Build, make it official." Henry hesitated. "People will talk again." "Let them," she said simply. "We are not doing this for them." A faint smile crossed his face. "You really have changed." "Maybe I just found the right teacher," she replied. For a moment, the noise of the city faded, and all that remained was the steady rhythm of rain and the quiet hum of hope. Later that week, Claire returned to Infinity Build and announced a new partnership between the company and the One Kindness Project. The press reaction was cautious at first, but the sincerity behind it began to shine through. Workers from both organizations joined forces to rebuild shelters and community centers across the city. When Claire visited the Brooklyn site again, she found Henry standing beneath a banner that read, "One Kindness Day, Grand Opening." The crowd cheered as the ribbon was cut. He looked at her across the celebration. And for the first time in months, both of them smiled without the weight of guilt or fear. The world had judged them once, but now, they were building something no headline could destroy. 1 year later, the city was alive with spring. The sun poured through the tall windows of the renovated Brooklyn Community Center, now filled with laughter, music, and the sound of hammers shaping new beginnings. A banner hung across the main hall that read, "One Kindness Day, First Anniversary." Claire stood on the small stage, dressed simply, a white blouse and dark jeans. She looked out over the crowd, families, volunteers, and workers who had once lost everything but had rebuilt their lives piece by piece. Beside her, Henry adjusted the microphone, his expression calm but proud. She began. "A year ago, this was just an empty building. Today, it is a home for hope. And it all started with one act of kindness, on one cold night." The crowd applauded softly, some smiling, some wiping away tears. Claire turned to Henry. "But the person who deserves to speak today is the man who reminded us what humanity really means. Henry Miles." Henry took a slow breath and stepped forward. "I used to think kindness was weakness," he said, his voice steady. "That giving something away meant you had less. But this past year taught me that giving is what fills you. I gave away a jacket that night, but I gained something greater, a purpose, a family, a future." He looked at Claire, his eyes warm. "And someone who believed in me when I could not believe in myself." The audience erupted in applause. Claire's gaze held his as she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, clear frame. Inside was a single silver button, worn and scratched. "You left this on that jacket," she said, handing it to him. "I kept it. It reminded me that kindness is never wasted." Henry smiled, emotion tightening his voice. "Then let me give it back to you, because it belongs where it started." "Ah." He knelt, not in formality but in sincerity, and held her hand. "Claire Raymond," he said quietly, "you changed my life, long before I knew your name. Will you let me spend the rest of it proving that kindness can build forever?" For a heartbeat, the room was silent except for the sound of breath and the soft flutter of the banner above them. Then Claire's eyes filled, and she whispered, "Yes." "Oh." The crowd cheered as they stood together, hands clasped beneath the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Later that evening, as the city lights flickered on, Henry and Claire walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, the same bridge he had once drawn when he had nothing left but hope. Now it stretched before them, endless and golden. Claire leaned her head on his shoulder and said softly, "You were right, Henry. Kindness really does build bridges." He smiled, looking out over the water. "And love keeps them standing." The wind carried their laughter across the river, a quiet promise that even the smallest act of goodness could change a life, and maybe the world.